Like even if you have elections and you have somebody run, nobody knows them, and nobody has any kind of background in politics unless they are part of the ruling party, which wasn't helpful. So that's the kind of the political scene that we're talking about. And it's important for what's happening today in Tunisia. So I want to argue that the revolution in Tunisia has essentially 4 phases. And the most important one is the phase that's happening right now. The first phase was simmering for a long time. It's inequality, the end of the middle class in Tunisia, which was very strong in the 60s and 70s, even in the early 80s, oppression, injustice, and especially the rise of the president's in-laws in terms of politics and business in Tunisia. And then the second phase was with the initial revolt by Mohamed Bouazizi, who was the young man who was harassed by the police because he was selling vegetables and didn't have license. Not that it's illegal to sell vegetables on the street, you just have to have a license. And any business license for selling anything requires going through the political institutions of the government, which are completely controlled by the RCD party, completely controlled by security forces, which means you have to bribe and beg and be part of the conspiracy, essentially, against the rest of the people. And if you're not part of that circle, you can't live, essentially. So that's why you walk into any business, you see the picture of the president. Why would people put it? Because if you don't have the picture of the president, if you don't display your support to the national security forces, then you can't do business. Your business license will expire at the end of the year and you can't renew it. So that's what we're talking about. So for people who refuse to be part of the political system and adopt it, they're completely excluded from any form of livelihood. So that was the second phase was, in my opinion, a short phase, which was this young man committing suicide, died eventually in hospital after a few weeks, and the solidarity movement that started to revolt against the oppression and the injustice that was made to him. And that started as a peaceful movement. Most of the media reports show violence. The violence was very targeted in Tunisia. It was targeted against the police that oppressed the population. It was targeted against businesses owned by the family of the president's wife. It wasn't random people going into random places and breaking into houses and breaking into things. There was a little bit of theft, which happens in these kinds of things. But it was very well targeted attack on the ruling family. In that initial phase of the revolution, the government messed up big time in terms of PR. And that's what really accelerated the events in Tunisia. The president applied kind of a Bush rhetoric about terrorism. So the first few waves of attacks and clashes between the police, he goes on national TV and he says these are a bunch of thugs, these are a bunch of terrorists, zero tolerance, we're not going to allow this in this country. And he didn't say sorry for what happened. He didn't say, you know, by that time there was at least 100 people who died, nothing. And that was adding insult to injury for the population. So that led to a massive movement, again, a leaderless movement, spontaneous movement, not from Islamist groups. We're talking about young people who sympathize with what happened to Bouazizi and others who died in these clashes. And it built up all the way to the capital, and that was the scene that was reported to some extent in the United States when the media woke up to what was happening in Tunisia. The labor movement was part of it, the student movement was part of it, the women's movement was part of it, but also people who were completely depoliticized for generations decided that it's time to join in. And it wasn't organized. I mean, some people describe it in the media as, you know, these young people on the street with a rock on one hand and a cell phone on the other. And that's how things organized, text messaging and saying, this is where things are happening. We're going to the government building, we're going to protest, and we're going to demand jobs, freedom, and dignity. Those were the requirements. Those were the demands from the population. So that's phase 3 of the revolution. And that's what led to the president eventually leaving the country. Phase 4 is the most important phase. And I was worried at some point that the revolt will stop there, that people will say, okay, he's gone, great, now we can go home. But I'm so glad that it didn't happen. Nobody went home to this day. This phase of the revolt is essentially cleansing the government, cleansing all the institutions. We're talking about the National Company for Transportation, removing all the key elements that were part of the government and running those businesses. We're talking about the entire parliament. We're talking about school districts. We're talking about police chiefs and local police stations. It's not like the population didn't know who these people are. They do. And you go on YouTube, you go on Facebook, and you see these videos coming every other day, though not reported in the media here. It's still happening to this day. Videos of workers going into the headquarters of XYZ company and taking the major CEOs and CFOs who they know are part of the ruling party network in terms of business alliance and political alliance, and taking them to the parking lot and sending them away, and setting up committees to run these companies. It's happening within the media. All the major newspapers, including government-owned newspapers, who have very talented journalists who couldn't do anything for years. They were completely suppressed. All that talent is now coming out, and they're taking their editors and sending them to the street and setting up editorial committees with very brilliant journalists who are reviving journalism, reviving radio, reviving the TV networks. All that hidden talent that was oppressed is now rebuilding the country. So this is the most important phase of this revolution. It's literally cleansing the system and picking those individuals one by one, and creating a movement of vigilantes for democracy, for freedom. So the revolt didn't stop, even though CNN stopped reporting on it.